And in closing, thank you for your participation in the Partners in Action Conference. And now I'll introduce the speaker, the first speaker, the presenter, Ms. Tricia Tingle. Thank you, Tricia.
Thank you, Bob. So I'm Tricia Tingle, the Associate Director of Tribal Justice Support. And what I would like to do is have my staff turn on their camera, because we all talk to each other, and I would just like to just briefly introduce them and have you see in real time who they are. And so I'm going to start with Benny Francisco. He is our Director of Tribal Court Assessments. Joellen Cree is on detail from Rocky Mountain. Simone Toya is, you need to know Simone, she is the money distributor. And all of the letters that come from me actually are distributed by Simone, and she's so helpful. And so, I mean, every one of our staff is really spectacular. And Melissa Lee might be on the phone. Are you on the phone, Melissa? Sometimes she has trouble with her computer.
Yes, I'm on the phone. I'm on virtually, but when I turn on my camera, that's what you get. So hello, everyone.
All right, and then we have an intern. So I do want to make that announcement. Kaylee Hudson is our intern. She's a second-year law student. So we always welcome law students to come and intern with us. So if you know any law students that are interested in going through pathways, then they should talk to Kaylee. But it's very helpful to have a law student on board. And so anyway, I just wanted you to meet the staff. And of course, we have speakers today, and Judge Paul Day from Leech Lake, Judge Ringhan from Red Lake, Judge Trepanier from LCO, and Judge Swan from Sault Ste. Marie. And we will follow up and end with Dave Connor. Dave has been such an advocate for tribal courts. I cannot express my gratitude for his guidance and his support for tribal courts. When I started this position in 2010, TJS had $5 million, that's it. That's all we had for every tribal court in the whole US. And of course you get your base, which is 196 tribes have base, but the base is not what it should be based on a formula. So with all of that, we now are well over $30 million to distribute different particular appropriation line items. And a lot of that is due to Dave Connor and his advocacy. So I really appreciate his work. And so he's going to talk about the money at the end. So the way we'd like to do is have a presenter finish their presentation, and then if you have particular questions for that presenter, we can open it up, and then we can for a couple of questions, and then open up to everyone at the end of the conversation. So the one thing I do want to start off by saying is that, and I'm sure Benny will cover this, is the Tribal Justice Support Directorate is one of the very, very few divisions of the Bureau of Indian Affairs that actually has a specific statute that tells us what to do. And so we are mandated not by the Snyder Act, which that's where a lot of authority comes from the Bureau, but of course it ultimately ties back to that. But Congress felt that we needed to have a specific statute, and they have mandated the things that we have done. And so what we call right now our tribal court assessments, and Benny will go over that, in the law it's called a survey. And But if you look at what the law says, the survey must entail 5 major components of a tribal court. And that basically is our assessment. It's not anything that we made up. It is something that is mandated by the law. And our funding is based on your assessments. As I'm sure everybody knows, the majority of the tribes in Great Lakes have received at least one court assessment. And the one thing that final thing I will lead off with is it is our position that the tribes dictate to us their need. And they do that through the assessment. And that's what these judges are going to talk about is we just are here to support you, give you some sort of plan to go forward, and then you determine how you want to spend the money and what your priorities are. And the last thing, one more thing is a lot of times, and Judge Day reminded me of this several months ago, when the Justice Department, when you have a CTAS grant and your grant is going to end, and for some reason you can't pick that grant up for a year, we will bridge you for your program that is going to go away. And Judge Day, I'm sure, will talk a little bit about that, and Judge Trepanier will talk about that. But don't forget to tell us when your CTAS grant goes away and you are behind on your grant application. And basically, it is the BJA that has certain dates for their grants, and they may not correspond with our funding. So let us know. So with that, I do want to turn the conference over to Benny Francisco, who is just wonderful, and we so appreciate his work. He has tribal court assessments all over the U.S. and manages them. So that's a large part of what we do. So Benny.
Good morning. Thank you, Tricia. Let me share my screen really quick and start it. Okay. Can you guys see the screen? The PowerPoint? I'm assuming yes. Okay. All right. Well, good morning, everyone. As Tricia said, I'm Benny Francisco with the Tribal Justice Support Directorate. I'm the director for the Court Assessment Division of TJS. I'm officed in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I'm originally from a little place called Pruitt, New Mexico, which is part of the Navajo Nation. I'm a Diné citizen. So thank you for inviting me, and I'm happy to be here. So wanted to talk a little first about the Tribal Justice Support. As Tricia had mentioned, TJS is statutorily mandated. And under that particular code, that is where we carry our duties and the relationship that we have with tribes, the government-to-government relationship we have with tribes in the United States. We serve all federally recognized tribes, and under 3601 is where we provide all of the technical assistance, training, and funding for tribal courts. The mission for TJS is really to further the development and operation of tribal courts in the United States. Also, those that are still part of the CFR courts. Really, there are 3 main functions of tribal justice support, and that's to provide training, technical assistance, and funding to those tribal courts, whether they are traditional, alternative courts, or westernized court system. So under this, the 3 focused area of TJS training, We strive a lot on providing training and giving opportunity to tribal courts to provide their own training, whether it's for their particular tribal court, and then in some cases, hosting a regional or sub-regional training for other tribal courts within their region. So we have learned that tribes are, the best to train other tribes. So just on average, TJS funds training to tribal courts, and on average, there's about a little over 3,000 that are trained on an annual basis. With that, that's at least 15 to 20 tribes that are funded annually for tribe training. Technical assistance. TJS provides really two types of technical assistance. One of them is primarily the tribal court assessment, which we'll talk in depth about. And then also what stems out of the court assessment is independent requests. So very specific TA that the tribe may wish for that we can provide, or at least help administer a TA. And then, of course, the court assessments. We average about 50 court assessments annually. And there in the Midwest region, we are over 25 tribes that have been assessed in the Midwest region to date. So under the code, the 3612, so under the 3601, particularly in section 3612, talks about the survey, as Tricia had mentioned at the beginning. We are tasked to survey, quote unquote, tribal court need in the United States. And so since then, that survey has essentially been the assessment process with tribal justice support. We have, since 2013, incorporated the trial court performance standards, and that's why we start counting from 13 that have been modified for tribal courts. So I'll talk a little bit more about those standards on the next slide. But here, this just shows you a graph of the progress that we have made over the years. We are well over 370 tribal court assessments completed in the United States. That does not include the current FY year of 2020. Those are in progress. So we are already over 55 court assessments that are in progress currently in this FY year. As you can see, we had a little dip, and that was definitely results of the pandemic. But we had had a huge rebound in 21, and I expect that 22 will just be as high as 21 for the court assessments. So this is just a visual of the amount of work that TJS does, in particular the assessments. We have basically coverage to do these assessments throughout the United States. So every region has a contractor. So a little bit more about who we utilize and what standards that we utilize. So again, under 3612, this particular assessment must be done independently by non-federal entities such as our basically federal contractors. TJS does a solicitation of contractors. They meet a very strict requirements and very diverse within each region and tribe. We assure that the tribal court contractors are definitely from the regions within the area that are well versed within those tribes that are within that region. We assure that they are experienced tribal court judges, prosecutors, public defenders that have worked in those particular courts within that region. So this assessment really is to assess the condition of the tribal court in the terms of, looking at what is working for the tribe and what is not working, and then as a result, provide particular recommendations from the contractor in those areas. Also through this assessment, it is determined what resources are needed, what funding is needed, and really just to best administer of justice in tribal courts. It's also important to note that this assessment is non-punitive. So this is definitely a non-punitive assessment. We utilize the trial court performance standards, as I had mentioned. These were originally drafted for state courts, then have modified for tribal courts today. One of the things that we really look at is definitely performance and self-assessment and self-improvement within the tribal courts. So here are the 5 concepts that we had mentioned earlier at the beginning. Basically, we look at the access to justice. Within those areas are court safety, the accessibility, the convenience of tribal court, the participation, even down to the cost of filing and et cetera. Expedition and timeliness of the tribal court. So we're looking at the process, the case process, the fulfillment, the promptness of the tribal court. We provide several recommendations on like implementing a particular timeline of case structure and case filing implementation and strategies. Also, the equality and fairness and integrity of the court. So looking at the judicial process, the court system, clarity, the enforcement of other maybe administrative orders, how records kept. The contractors have the ability to sit in hearings, and then also the independence and accountability, looking at personnel practices, personnel, the morale of the court, public education. Are there things as far as policies for for press that may come in or things of that nature. And then also tribal specific. So those this one is very tribal specific. If there's anything not noted in the previous 4 performance areas, the contractors or the assessment has the ability to provide particular and specific recommendations for that particular tribe in that last performance area. So why a tribal court assessment? Or really, it is definitely a tool for the tribal justice system. A lot of tribes have utilized this assessment for a guiding document for monitoring performance, evaluation of performance, and really a guide to improve and further develop their tribal court practices and policies. Also, the assessment identifies need, such as funding, training, additional technical assistance. And then also, those tribes that go through the assessment become eligible for a one-time funding for tribal court operation and training. One-time meaning that this is a non-recurrence funding. It's not a base increase. Basically, tribes can request funding post-assessment on a year-to-year basis. The other important thing too is a lot of tribes have utilized this assessment as a tool to leverage other federal resources. We work a lot with DOJ and CTAS, and other tribal courts have utilized this for funding with like USDA or HUD for court facilities and things of that nature that TJS can't fund. So speaking of funding, again, under 3613, we provide financial assistance to tribal courts, those tribes that have been assessed with this tribal court assessment with TJS. So just an example of some of the funding that we may provide, basically employment costs or costs of personnel, and it also includes fringes, training for court personnel, equipment such as court supplies, outreach material, consultants, We understand that a lot of tribes, may need code revisions, basically a strategic planner to come in and strategically plan tribal courts, development of policies, bench books. So that particular cost we can cover by providing funds for a consultant. Things we cannot fund are unfortunately construction. So we can't fund anything related to construction, renovations, rental expenses, utility expenses, motor vehicles, anything related to law enforcement, and then of course food and beverages that we cannot fund through TJS funding. A little bit about training, and I think some of the other speakers will get a lot more into detail about how they've utilized the assessment and what kind of trainings they put on. But this is just an example of some of the trainings that we have identified through the court assessments, and tribes have identified themselves that we are able to work with tribes to provide funding and TA on these particular trainings. But very basic tribal court personnel training, like court clerk judges or a judge's training, roundtable discussions on various topics. Trial advocacy skills training has been huge. Opioid awareness training that really ties in with the advocacy portion of the training. VAWA related training, implementation. We've been roundtable discussions on related to VAWA has been huge. Child welfare training, circle sentencing, or other traditional or alternative systems training, healing to wellness training, and then of course, I'll call it other substance abuse awareness training. So all of these trainings are all for tribal court, for the court personnel. These trainings can be on-site or off-site. We encourage tribes to bring the trainer to them, or host on-site training for, like I said, for themselves or for other tribal courts within their area. And then just quickly on other funding opportunities that TJS may provide. So under Public Law 280, we have the appropriations where we can have a pot of money for those tribes that are under PL 280. Tawahe, so those tribes that go through the assessments, we can provide support to anything related to children and family services, VAWA implementation. Those tribes that are wishing to implement VAWA, we have funding for them to help support them, and then VAWA training as well. That's strictly for training related to VAWA. So I think we'll cover this a little bit further down in the assessment. So how do tribes receive a court assessment? Well, we need a written request from tribal leadership. It could be we have a template, but it can always be your own template or your own requests. But the sample request letter is available here under the BIA TJS website, or you can simply contact myself or Melissa Lee. We can definitely provide you the assessment and the additional information that we usually send out regarding the assessment. One thing that I also want to mention is I am available, Melissa and I, or the TJS is available for one-on-one meetings, virtual one-on-one meetings. I'm more than happy to schedule that regarding tribal court assessments. If you have any further questions after this presentation, but just please email myself or Melissa, and we can definitely schedule a one-on-one meeting with tribal courts. And then, so just a quick recap, assessments are available immediately. As I mentioned, we have contractors covering the entire BIA regions. Also important to know that those tribes that have been assessed after 3 to 4 years are encouraged to go through another assessment. So they become eligible for another assessment or a round 2 assessment. It's important to note that these assessments are non-punitive. They also are not AOTR reviews. And then those tribes, and then also important also to note that those tribes that do not have a tribal court are still eligible to receive an assessment. The assessment is tailored just a little bit. Basically, it is a startup document, or really helping tribes to establish a tribal court. And then also only those tribes that go through this particular assessment under 3612 are eligible for funding and TA from TJS. Submitting a letter from tribal leadership starts the process, and we and Melissa and everybody else in TJS is available for virtual meetings with tribal courts. I'm going to quickly put this up. This is just my contact information along with Tricia and Simone, and I can share this again later on in the presentation. So that is it.
So thank you so much, Benny. I will say that my number has changed to a 202 number, and it's on my signature line, and I will get that for you. I don't know it right off but I'll get it before the end of the presentation. So what I'd like to do now is have the different tribes that we have assessed that have been creative in the way that they are using their funding. And I was never so proud, and for me this is a big deal because we advocate so much for tribal courts on a national level. But one of your tribes was recognized on an international level, and that's Leech Lake. So The Hague in Switzerland is a place where the international community comes and talks about indigenous courts throughout the world. And Judge Day's Joint Jurisdiction Court was highlighted there, and we're very proud of that. And I think I won't talk much with it because you have your own tribal attorneys, but Castro Huerta is a problem. And I think some of the options that tribal courts can do is to continue to do joint jurisdiction courts. And I think that Leech Lake has really done a good job and can give us some good ideas. Although, however they use their funding, that's up to them. And we're we would like to hear, Judge Day, about how you use the funding from TJS. And I'll turn it over to you, Judge.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, all right. You guys made me nervous. Okay, so I guess I'd like to do this, talk about the joint powers agreement just a little bit at the beginning, and then talk about the funding second. So years ago, before 2012, when I became the chief judge, we had a number of judges working here at Leech Lake, and they had done a lot of the spade work for the programs and agreements that we have in place now. And so it's you've heard the phrase, I was riding on the shoulders of somebody else, in order to be able to rise this high. And that's kind of the situation I'm in. I'd like to give credit to these folks. Now, one is Ms. I'm sorry if I blanked out there. We got Anita Fine-Day was chief judge for a while, and she's out there working in the communities too and doing a good job. Mary, if you can help me, what's the Itasca County judge's name over there that is a Shinabikwe? Anyhow, it'll come back to me. It just totally slipped my mind.
Judge McKay?
Corey?
Corey Wabasik. Yeah, Corey
Corey
Wabasik. I'm sorry. I apologize to Corey if she's listening. Sorry. So anyhow, a lot of this work has been done by folks previous to me. The relationship is, as you all know, working in tribal courts, the relationship sometimes with the local counties is not good. And we were certainly in that category of situations where the Leech Lake band members did not have a good relationship with the county, and the county didn't have a good relationship with the band members. And it resulted in, of course, lots of jailings and whatnot of our people that maybe shouldn't have happened, and lots of other social issues related to that. The folks finally, the folks at Cass County and the folks at Leech Lake finally got together and decided, let's try something new. Let's try to work together and combine our resources to address some of these problems and issues. So it's as basic as that. And it took a long time, but it finally got off. Started, like I said before, just before I got there in 2012. What we have is an agreement to exercise joint powers, and how that has become visible to us is, number one, we have tribal police department, and we have a number of officers that work to patrol and maintain law and order on the reservation. Well, the county used to have to do that kind of work, but now we're taking that over, have taken it over. And now the county also has been cross-deputized, and the tribal police are cross-deputized, and they can enforce each other's laws. And we see it mostly in traffic matters, but it can be extended to other cases. We see a lot of every week, every month in the newspaper, local newspapers, we see some police action that was taken, and it was done jointly, whether it's on tribal land or whether it's just off the reservation or whatever the case might be. So those are one of the reasons, or the ways that we see the results of that joint powers agreement. The other is, and such thing is when we exercise joint court jurisdiction, and that's where we're talking about the wellness courts. We have 4 counties that butt up against the reservation boundaries, and the 2 largest, the numbers wise anyhow, the 2 largest counties are Cass County and Itasca County, and we have a joint powers agreement with those counties. For wellness court at Cass County, it's more of a DUI court. We're dealing with alcohol problems there. And in the Itasca County wellness court, we're dealing mostly with drugs. And so what we do is, when we have wellness court, we'll have 1 tribal judge and 1 county judge presiding over the hearing. And so we have Indians and non-Indians together in the courtrooms, so the participants. So that's it also has, in the past, we've had a drug program, a 3-year funded program with Cass County to deal with drug issues, just specifically for that. Let me look at my notes here. We also have an ongoing program right now called the JDAI, that's Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative, and Cass County and Leech Lake are working together on that, because we find that in the state of Minnesota, Cass County has one of the highest, if not the highest, rates of incarceration of juveniles. And so we're working to find ways to alleviate that situation. And so that's another example of how exercising a joint powers agreement can help. So with that background, let me just take a look at our funding and just give some examples of. For us, it started with the tribal court assessment that was done, and from there we were able to focus our needs much more in a much better way. So once that was accomplished, and I think that was about 5 years ago now that we've done our court assessment. Since then, we've been able to get funding from the PJS for we got a salary and fringe benefits for a court administrator, and that was done early on after we got the assessment. We got the salary and fringe for a court clerk. We have funding for defense attorneys in family cases. As you know, many of our families that come to court under a child protection case or whatever the situation might be, they can't afford to have legal counsel with them, so they're at a disadvantage because the ban has a trained lawyer who is handling those cases against them. So we've got funding now for some defense attorneys to help our families and kind of even out the situation. So decisions are made now in a more fair manner. So we have that, and we have training dollars for the court staff. We're able to focus our attention specifically on specific needs. For example, the clerks have special training that they go to, while the judges have special training that they go to as well. Let me just go down the list a little more. We have such things as computers. Our computer system was in pretty bad shape there until we got some funding there from the BIA, and just sometimes it's just basic office supplies such as copy paper and pens and file folders and whatnot. We're attempting to add. We're attempting really to move away from the Western court model to be a more traditional court. And in that regard, we have gotten some funding from the BIA in order to do such things as to change the look of our court. And we're disassembling the old Western European model with the high judge sitting up on high and sitting at floor level, sitting in a circle around tables, using our traditional medicines that we have when we do ceremonies, and bringing in the right people for these hearings, including elders, our CD counselor folks, our mental health folks, of course, the family relatives and whatnot. And so the funding that we get includes we ask for the ability to redo our walls in the courtroom and to have local artists come in and paint some whatever his vision is or her vision is to make it look family friendly. So we use our traditional kinds of artwork, including lots of plants and natural resources in the area that we're known for. So that's a work in progress at the present time. We also have during the shortly before we had the big pandemic, Leech Lake got hacked, and that went all across board. It really messed up our whole systems of communications here, and we were able to get some help from the BIA in order to replace some of the mechanical things that were needed after the hack, and get our court case reporting system back up to speed. So now we don't have to do everything by phone. We couldn't do things in person during the pandemic, but it was also difficult to do it by phone. So we quickly got back up to speed using Zoom. Another thing we got funding for was court security. We're always concerned. So some of our cases get highly contested, and of course, sometimes in the Western European model, there's a winner and a loser in a hearing, in a trial, what the case might be, and people get pretty upset. And we're always concerned that, that we have safety. So we're able to get a metal detector, and we have salary and benefits for a security officer who's able to check people as they come in to make sure everything is safe for everybody who's involved in our court hearings. We also have a bailiff that works for the courts, and he's provided to us by the Leech Lake Police Department. Court safety is a constant thing for us. We meet monthly on that and to discuss safety issues. In the past, another one of the joint jurisdiction efforts that we had was called our diversion program. If one of our banned juvenile members is found to be delinquent, or in other words, guilty of some violation, then the juvenile is sent over to Leech Lake Tribal Court and put in their juvenile diversion program, and so their disposition or their sentence is determined by the diversion court program, and oftentimes that's requires the juvenile to maybe to go out and do something traditional like harvest wild rice and do the whole process from beginning to end, report back to court what you've learned, what does that mean to you, how has that changed your view on this particular issue and whatnot. And so it's a positive way of using our background and culture and teachings to help our children stay out of just going to a training center or someplace like that. So that's another good example of our wellness court and joint jurisdiction issues. So that's just the flavor. I don't want to take up everybody's time, but I'm certainly available for questions, and I'll be glad to hear from anybody. And if I can do anything to help, I sure will. So, Tricia, I guess I'll turn it back to you at this time.
Thank you, Judge. Thank you very much. If there are any questions for Leech Lake, let us know. If not, we're going to go over to Red Lake and hear from Judge Ringhand.
Good morning. This is Mary Ringhand at Red Lake Nation Tribal Court, and I wanted to talk a little bit about our Tawahe funding. Red Lake got on board with one of the pilot tribes of Tawahe funding back in 2015, and it's really been a positive for our nation as far as allowing a lot of staff and training and dollars to upgrade our courtrooms. And right now we're funded with guardian ad litems that we didn't have before. And we've been able to work very closely with child protection. We had a lot of our community children out of home placement, and we've been able to really start reducing those numbers. Our Child Protection Family and Children Services has rebranded itself as Ombimin Dwagidinwe Maginadug, which means uplifting our relatives. And so we're really focusing on helping families reunify or be under supervision and work with case managers to get the services they need. And it's really been a positive for the community and getting a lot of less families separated, strengthening our families and getting them the services they need. And also we've got our Healing to Wellness Court. We're working with both children and adults in Healing to Wellness. And the name of that court is Mino Misko Mikna Keda, which means let's make a good red road for our people, which is a red road to services to help them get the different services they need. We're working with the Chestnut organization that does a global, gains assessment, which is a global assessment of individual needs. And Chestnut is also working with our tribe now on helping develop reducing recidivism. and we've been working at that. And we do have a really large court docket. We have both our criminal and civil jurisdiction, so we're always very busy. I think we have about 1,300 criminal cases a year, as well as a huge civil docket. And so Tawahe has been really helpful in providing those extra people working, especially in case management with our Humans Healing to Wellness Court. And overall, it's just helped us identify what needs we have for our court so that we can better serve our people. Trying to think of what else that Healing to Wellness Court, we've got, oh yeah, a big piece was security as well. And so we now have a security officer at our court, and we're upgrading our security systems. And we have with the Family and Children's Services, one of the key people has been a child case presenter. And we had an attorney in that position, and she really worked with the staff and the courts, and we all worked together to upgrade our child protection code and really put a lot of our traditional values in there. We have a courtroom basics guide that was developed so that families that are involved with child protection have a guide on what to expect and how to work their case plans, and it's been really positive. And we have more upgrades to coming to our code in that area as well. And I can't say enough about our guardian ad litems, who are kind of the eyes and the ears of the judge as far as getting out and finding out what the children need and where they're safe, and representing their best interests in court. And we just have a number of other staff that are supported by Tawahe as well. We have probation officers and funding from, the child case presenter, I guess, is the most key one. And then, of course, our judges and our Healing to Wellness Court. And it's really helped us braid our programs together. And that was kind of what Tawahe was about, helping us break down silos to get all those services out to the community that are needed for healing and wellness, and helping to reduce our jail population as well. I believe that's all I have. We're involved in a lot of things. We have in the opiate response teams in meeting, and that's support. We've been doing that for years now. And we have law enforcement assisted diversion programs that aren't necessarily jailing addicts, but getting them to get assessments right away and treatment. And mental health work as far as about commitments, getting people help they need. Really helped us in that way, and helping enhance our court system so we can serve our community in a lot better. Anything else?
Mary, thank you, Judge.
Okay, thank you.
So the one thing that I want to stress about the Tawahe funding is that TJS does their funding distribution a little differently than other parts of the Bureau. So there are 6 Tawahe pilot tribes, and we agreed to, this tribe tells us what they want and we fund it. And hopefully one day that will be base, but right now we fund it annually. But there is money left over after we fund the pilot tribes. And so the Tawahe money, while it funds Red Lake, and then I have one example that I'm just so proud of, it also funds Leech Lake's Wellness. So while Leech Lake is not a Tawahe tribe, there is extra money that will go to Leech Lake's Wellness Court and their joint jurisdiction court because it deals with children. So the point is we think outside the box, and tribes are the drivers of the bus, not us. So in light of the Secretary's focus on MMIW, Everything is interrelated. And if I misspeak, Mary, tell me, but it's my understanding at some point several months ago, there were 2 juvenile young ladies in Bemidji. And those 2 juveniles were removed from Bemidji and brought home to Red Lake and were within the Tawahe structure for juveniles. And my thought was, by that process and by using those tribal court funds, there were 2 possible vulnerable victims who could be subject to missing and murdered if they're unsupervised and they're wandering around, and they're brought home through this Tawahe project that Red Lake has initiated. And so in effect, through that whole process, through the funding, they actually brought their children home in many instances, but are now protecting them from some of the harshness of being outside away from their families. Is that a fair statement, Mary? I remember that.
Yes, we've been transferring cases from other counties when where there's the need there to have services from the reservation, and they aren't having maybe so much luck working with the counties, and so we transfer those cases into our court. And we've been trying to develop good relationships with other counties, and yeah, that's real positive as well, as far as reaching out and developing relationships. We've been part of the Tribal Court State Court Judges Forum in the state, so that's been also helpful with, funding. We're able to do some training and traveling and develop good relationships with all the judges in the state, and just kind of all excited about all of the good progress that we're making here in Red Lake for our community.
Well, thank you so much, Judge. And now I think we should go to LCO, Judge Trepanier. They've started a wellness court, and hopefully we can hear, I don't know, Judge, if you have a hearing now or soon. So let us know. You just got out of your hearing.
Yeah, thanks, Tricia. I did just finish with my ordinance docket, so I'm free now. I can talk about our wellness court here at LCO. It's with the Lakota Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Indians. It's in Northwest Wisconsin. I'm sure many of you know. So yes, in 2018, I was informed that I had received a grant. It was a CTAS Purpose Area 3 grant at that year, and it was for a Healing to Wellness Court. At that time, my staff and I, we did not have, we knew of Healing to Wellness Courts, we knew the model, but we didn't really know that much about them. So I was happy to get the grant, but I just didn't really know what to do with it. I did go to the mandatory training that you have to go to when you receive a grant, a CTAS grant. And I started talking to, Tricia from Tribal Justice Support, and she referred me to a gentleman by the name of Eric Maynard, who is a judge in the Penobscot Nation. Just by a conversation with him and his successful running of a Healing and Wellness Court, I was actually going to go visit the Penobscot tribe. That was our first idea, to get some knowledge about a Healing and Wellness Court. What ended up happening, I never went out to visit him, but I was able to receive funding from TJS to actually have Judge Maynard's company. It's called Hawks and Maynard. They were able to come to our location because of the funding that we received from Tribal Justice Support. And I did want to note that we did have a court assessment back in 2015. So that's what this is based upon. Once, on site, the team, they thoroughly trained all of our current staff, and plus we hired new staff from the grant. We hired a coordinator and we hired a case manager. They were actually hired right around the time that the consultants were on site. So they were able to receive comprehensive training, and we got the benefit of their many years of experience. And a few months later, it was probably right around June of 2019, we were able to actually start our Healing and Wellness Court, which was, I mean, for timing wise, it was really great. I mean, we were able to really fast track everything and hold a successful first time in Healing and Wellness Court. Since then, our Healing and Wellness Court has, obviously we've had the pandemic that kind of put a damper on certain things, but we are still running it today. We've had several successful candidates, our participants that graduated. Right now, we actually have 6 participants going through the program as we speak. And I still, I'm going to rely on further funding because our actual grant is finishing this year. I got an extension, so we are done this year, but we have some grant applications in the works, but I may require some funding for a bridge year, and I'm hoping that may keep us in the running because the program is so successful here at LCO. We have, as many of you probably do, we have serious problems with drugs on our reservation. So we really want to address that with this Healing and Wellness Court, and having that available for our people is very important. And I am a firm believer in the Wellness Court model, and I'll continue it as long as I can here at LCO. I really don't have much else to say about that particular topic, but I did want to note, just as a side note here, that the funding that we received from TJS was just one thing that we got. I mean, I received funding from them for several things, and I just wanted to say that, and that I'm very appreciative of it. So thank you, Tricia. Back to you.
Okay, Judge. So the one thing that is very important, and Dave can speak to this, is fortunately for us, Congress gives us discretionary funding. And once we get discretionary funding, we can be creative. You can be creative in your thought process and and how you want to implement things. Don't be afraid to call us and ask us. I think the CTAS grant for Red Lake's going out this year. I'm not sure. It'd have to, but I think there might be an ending. So we would bridge that. We would bridge whatever CTAS is paying for now until Red Lake can get that grant back up and running. We don't want that system to default. So we will fund that. And similarly, what happened with LCO is, and Judge Trepanier can correct me, but when he called and he said, we don't feel like that the grant, the CTAS grant has given us enough guidance. What do you guys have? So we offered to have someone come on site for 3 months, and it was my understanding, Judge, that your Healing to Wellness Court, the time exceeded your projected time under the CTAS grant, that it, in fact, you got your court up and running a lot faster than originally projected under the CTAS. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct, Tricia.
So we can help you get going faster. We will work and coordinate with the Justice Department with your CTAS. We don't want the programs to end because there is the funding, the grant funding ends at that time. So with that, I'm gonna turn it over to Tracy Swan from Sault Ste. Marie, and then we will have a conversation with Dave. Hello, Tracy.
Hello. Good afternoon and good morning to some of you. I'm Tracy Swan, the magistrate and court administrator for the Sioux Tribe of Chippewa Indians. And I love Tribal Justice Support Office. They have been wonderful to Sioux Tribe, and I hear they've been wonderful to many of you that have spoke this morning as well. Sioux Tribe had a tribal court assessment back in 2014, and I just pulled it up again, and I refer to it probably once a year when I need to go to the board or I need to call up Trish and say I need some money. And you know, every time I read it, I smile. I love it. I'm so appreciative of that assessment because, as Benny said, there's nothing punitive about it. It brings out, highlights all of the positive things that we do with what we have, and then it spotlights our needs, the desperate needs of the tribes that, you know, don't have sufficient base funding. So as I read it this morning, I was, you know, again, very proud of what we do with what we have and very appreciative of the additional one-time funding that we do get from TJS. But like someone had said earlier, that, you know, it is to for us to determine the resources and funding that we need to provide you know, expeditious and effective administration of justice. And that's exactly what we do, what we ask money for to provide. And just a little outline of our tribe, and I know tribes are all different, but when you look at our geographical area and our population that we serve, we have a 7-county service area up here in northern Michigan. That's kind of a triangular shape, 90 miles wide, 170 miles long, kind of, you know, spread across a checkerboard pattern, about 1,600 acres of land, and one court system, right? So one judge, one court administrator, one court clerk, one probation officer, and that makes things difficult when you have jurisdiction across those 7 counties, trying to provide travel to those places. In the past, it was Polycom, trying to hook them up at maybe a tribal health center or a hotel or a room at a casino to try to, you know, provide due process to an individual. Given Zoom now, things have made it easier. However, traveling, you know, can take up to 3 hours to get to one county to actually have a traveling court system and to administer justice in those areas. So with the one-time funding from BIA, we were able to hire a deputy court clerk. At one point, we were able to hire an additional probation officer. We were able to obtain a new electronic case management system, a new electronic case management system for our probation office staff. We were able to get back in, I believe, 2016, when we had implemented VAWA 2013, we were able to put on a VAWA training here in Sault Ste. Marie and bring in Paskiyaki tribe to help do a presentation and provide peer-to-peer training on domestic violence and the crimes under VAWA at that time, which was wonderful because we had, I believe, 7 different tribes attend up here. And that was new to all of us, getting that, you know, our inherent authority back, and being kind of a small, you know, small towns up here in Michigan, being able to put on a big training like that from, especially Paskiyaki, who has, you know, 10 times the caseload that we do, was really beneficial to our law enforcement, our prosecutors, our court staff. It was wonderful to be able to have that extra funding to do that. And then we also, with VAWA, you know, we needed to have video and audio recordings of everything. We were able to get that equipment from one-time funding. And then COVID hit, the pandemic occurred, and I emailed up Trish and said, help, what do we do? We still wanted to continue holding hearings. You know, kids were removed from their parents. Things still needed to occur. We immediately went to Zoom hearings, and as most of you know, our families are indigent. So BIA was able to provide us with money to purchase cell phones and data plans so that our participants, our moms, our dads, our defendants, were able to join the hearings by Zoom from their home and still have their case heard, which was wonderful. They were also able to provide us with money to purchase drug screens in different forms of instead of doing in-person witnessed urine screens, we were able to get sweat patches that would detect many drugs. So we still were able to maintain safety measures in the community and to the person themselves by having 7-day sweat patches placed on the individuals, which were costly at the time, but it was a way to still maintain, I guess it's safety and accountability to some of our defendants and our parents. We received funding for laptops so some of our staff could work from home where not every one of us had a laptop at the time. They've just been wonderful. That's just to name a few off the top of my head of what our needs were and what was available and what they were able to provide us at the time. I know some of the judges have also talked about healing to wellness courts. Sioux Tribe has a drug court program, a domestic violence court program, and a healing to wellness court family preservation court program. As Judge Stepanier had said, he had CTASC Purpose Area 3 for his healing to wellness court, as did we. And as you know, they all end in September. We were able to get a 6-month extension through CTAS to take us into June. And had I not talked to Trish or sat on this call today, I wouldn't have known about the bridge that they can provide in the event, we don't get funded again until next September. So I'm very thankful that that is available because to be without services or just end somebody's case and not being able to provide drug screens and weekly reviews or counseling sessions, et cetera, would be really detrimental to our families and our children. I think that's all. That's about all that I have. Besides that, it's time for a new assessment. It would be really nice to see what the contractor says today, given the expansion of jurisdiction with VAWA 2022, the additional acquisition of more lands. Our tribe is always trying to buy additional properties, put land into trust. And with doing that, that expands our jurisdiction. There's more people moving on the reservation, more houses being built. And those cases all come to the one court. And the tribe doesn't provide for additional employment, additional staffing. It's just more work, more caseloads, more crimes happening, more families to serve, Supreme Court ruling decisions, things that are happening that changes the justice system as a whole, and all the while, not getting an increase in our base funding. So I would like to see, I think it's important, like Benny had said in the beginning, every 3 to 4 years, get a new assessment to see what's available and use that assessment as a guiding tool to increase your funding or have that one-time funding as needed. Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much. The one thing that I think is important is if you haven't had an assessment in the past couple of years, go ahead and ask for one, because the one thing we like to do is show the improvement. And there is tremendous improvement. And then we ask a particular tribe if they want to mentor another tribe, because that's where our specialty lies. I'm not talking about TJS, I'm talking about Indian country, is our specialty lies in sharing of our experiences and learning from our peers. And that's something that we want to highlight and have other people learn from that. So before we go today, real quick, Benny, do you have any thoughts on the assessment, updating assessments for different tribes that have It's been since 2014.
Nothing in particular, but I mean, just really encourage them to resubmit another request. And, you know, since there's been new contractors since 2014. So I think, you know, getting another assessment from a different contractor, different eyes is really important. And really, when those tribes that go through the second round of assessment, the progress is really noted in the assessment, and so it really helps the tribal court see actual progress. And then, of course, you know, we identify any additional TA or funding that can be provided. So definitely encourage tribes to submit another request. Yeah. And most of the, I was going through the list this morning, but most of the tribes were assessed between 2014 to 16. So almost all of more than half of the 25 that have been assessed are definitely eligible to submit another request. So that's it for now.
All right, thank you. So now I know that Dave was on, and we just could not. There you are, Dave Connor. We could not function without Dave. He tells me about the budget and is such an advocate for courts. We should all be appreciative for his very kind but persistent advocacy for tribal courts. So Dave, it's your turn, sir.
Good afternoon, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well, and thanks, Tricia, for setting this up. And Tricia, I must say you're way too kind. You know, it really is all a team approach. You know, Red Lake does advocate, and Chairman Siki on the Tribal Interior Budget Council, and we do, you know, a lot of work to help the full TBIC body understand, you know, the importance of the budget and courts. So it's kind of become a hobby of ours in a sense, but, you know, we have to give credit to TBIC. You know, the tribes across the country continue for quite a few years now to emphasize the importance of funding for courts and for Tawahe programs. And of course, we do have good friends in the House and the Senate appropriations committees that have been advocating and trying, you know, their best within their funding constraints to provide, you know, funding increases. I'm wondering, Bob, could you put that slide up that I had sent?
Sure can. Stand by a second.
Yeah.
See that okay?
Yeah, could you hit full screen?
Yeah, let's see here.
Or view slide, slideshow. Hit the slideshow tab to the left. To the left of review, you see where it.
What did I do? There
Can
we
you
go.
back? All right. Do you see the little menu where it says slideshow further to the right?
Okay.
Yeah. Now hit. There you go. Thanks. Thank you. I just prepared, you know, a little summary slide of some recent actions relating to courts that, you know, of course, are of interest to all of us. And for the 22 enacted year, this year, Congress provided $43.2 million for tribal courts. And they specifically included a $5 million general program increase for the 196 operating courts, as Tricia mentioned. And also, this was brought up a little bit before, but within the 43 million is about $7.5 million for Tawahe court funding. but it's important to point out that a fairly small amount of that funding actually goes to the Tawahe pilot tribes. The bulk of it is used by Tricia and her office for the tribes across the country to assist with, even though as part of Tawahe there is a pilot program, with 6 pilot sites, including Association of Village Council Presidents in Alaska, which actually represents 56 tribes. But the mission of Tawahe, really is for all of us, improving the lives of families through various flexible means. So the bulk of the $7.5 million in Tawahe court funding that Tricia receives, again, supports tribes across the country, including many in this region. Last I looked, that money was being used to fund at least 120 positions nationwide. So it's really been very beneficial. And also for 2022, Congress provided $30.8 million for all the tribal justice support programs, and they added an additional $4 million for PL 280 courts. And of course, there's many tribes in our region that are under PL 280. So the funding level this year went up to $19 million for 280 courts. And then also, many have probably heard about the McGirt decision and some of its ramifications. And Congress did provide a very substantial $62 million to address the issues associated with McGirt. And Congress directed that this $62 million is for the purposes of law enforcement, detention, and courts, and that the Bureau is directed to consult with affected tribes on, how that funding should be utilized for those 3 program areas. And for FY 2023, the BIA or the president requested an additional increase for courts, and that's $52.7 million, which is $9.5 million over 2022 enacted. And that does include an additional $5 million for courts O&M, or operation and maintenance funding, and then an additional general increase for tribal court programs. And then for tribal justice support, the president requested, I have there, it says 30.8 million, but that was an error. The administration requested 34.8 million. And within the 34.8 million is, to me, one of the most important things I've seen associated with courts. And that's proposing under the Tawahe label, $8 million for a new program for helping tribes, existing and new tribes, establish healing to wellness courts. Never in the history of the BIA has there been any actual BIA line item funding for healing to wellness courts. The only way we've been able to get the help we have gotten for healing to wellness courts is through, Tricia utilizing flexibilities within the, the court's Tawahe funding and maybe other PL 280 justice support funds. But this is a direct statement by BIA that they want to add a new funding line for healing to wellness courts. And again, that's so important. And I want to give a little example. During the last budget of the previous administration, when Assistant Secretary Tara Sweeney was presenting before the House Interior Appropriations Committee on their final budget, there was a lot of discussion over the opioid crisis facing Indian country and really all of America. And one of the House Interior Appropriations Committee members, Shelley Pingree of Maine, she directly asked Tara Sweeney, why don't you have any funding for healing to wellness courts in your budget? We know, and it's been shown that, healing to wellness courts truly offer, an important way to reduce the opioid crisis and help keep people out of jail. And the only response that Tara Sweeney could make was that BIA never funds, we've never had a line item for healing to wellness courts, so we just don't do that. And I thought, to me, I watched that hearing and it was striking to me. But another interesting thing is that in 2023 and last year too, Shelley Pingree of Maine, she's now the chair of the House Interior Appropriations Committee. And so I know that committee and Chair Pingree view, healing to wellness courts as an important avenue for helping people in Indian communities. So I wanted to, mention that to me, that's huge. And the House Interior Appropriations Committee did mark up their version of the 2023 funding bill a couple weeks ago. And that's at the bottom of this chart. And for courts, they recommend, in a sense, a whopping $82 million for tribal courts, including $4 million more for courts O&M, but a $35 million courts general increase. Again, that's a very substantial statement, but we also have to have our dose of reality. The Senate Interior Appropriations Committee has yet to come out with their version of the 2023 funding bill. They say they are expecting to have it very soon, around the end of July. So probably within a couple of weeks. And the Senate and the House, they always vary a little bit. The Senate's numbers, for courts and justice support are likely to be a little different from the House. And then they have to get together to work out that difference in conference. But still, when you see the House Interior Appropriations Committee requesting $82 million for courts, that's by far the highest amount they've ever recommended. So that's very good news to see that. And for tribal justice support, there's also a good size increase, and that's 42.8 million. And some of the language in their bill is a little confusing, and I'm a little uncertain about a few pieces of it. But they say it's 12 million above 22 enacted, but it may not be very clear if it's including the full 8 million for healing to wellness courts. And also there is a substantial increase again for the PL 280 courts. They're adding in 12 million more. So in 2023, they'd be providing $31 million for PL 280 courts. So that is a very substantial increase in that program. And also they are recommending, again, the $62 million to for McGirt related support for law enforcement, detention, and courts. And, you know, I do suspect that since Congress enacted 62 million in 2022 for McGirt-related activities, they're almost certain to both House and Senate enact that 62 million in 2023 also. So that's kind of a summary of you know, the 2022 funding levels and where things are at on 2023. The House has come out with their version of 2023, and again, compared to, you know, other years, it's a very good proposal, a strong proposal. And then we have to wait and see what the Senate comes out with. But also another little dose of reality. Every few years, the BIA Office of Justice Services issues a tribal law and order report for Congress. They call it the TLOA report. And in the most recent TLOA report submitted earlier this year, they have a section where they you know, have come up with formula-based determinations of estimated need for law enforcement, detention, and courts. And they estimate the actual funding need for tribal courts is $1.15 billion. So they, you know, their report justifies and points out a need based on, you know, data-driven formula efforts that, you know, tribal courts needs not the 82 million that the House recommended, but we actually need $1.15 billion. So we're a long ways away, you know, from where we need to be. But it is good that we have, you know, some needs-based justification in certain BIA funding areas that help to justify funding. And one particular area is the OJS periodic tribal law and order report. So excuse me. So that's and also just generally, since, you know, courts and Tawahe are so tied together, you know, it's not just to say the request for 8 million for healing to wellness courts, but there were some substantial Tawahe related increases in other areas, including like $5 million for a new economic development program for tribes. And all told, I think and also more pilot tribes, 10 more pilot tribes requested in 2023. So, you know, so there's a lot good, not just, you know, with this Congress and for courts and for Tawahe. So, and that's pretty much all I wanted to report on.
Thank you, Dave. The one thing that I have heard from the Asia office is they are very much interested in creating wellness courts. That's something that's very important to them and something that we would support. And not all wellness courts are the same, as you know, and that is just fine with us. So whatever works in your community is what we will support. So I don't know if there are any questions. If there are, let us know. If not, I'll hand it over to Bob. And I want to thank the Great Lakes region. Thank you so much for having us. We just appreciate it. I have emotional ties to Minnesota and to Red Lake. I have to always say that because I do. And so thank you all for being creative, for going back to the ways that we know work traditionally and culturally, and we will certainly support that. So thank you all presenters. Thank you to my staff, or to TJS staff, and Bob.
Thank you all. Thank you to the presenters as well. And thank you for your participation in Partners in Action. The slides, the PowerPoint, there's two PowerPoints. One was the Dave Connor slide that showed the numbers, and the other was from Benny Francisco. I will put those in the chat, and you can grab them there as soon as we're finished here. If you cannot grab them there, earlier presentations, some of the folks from external from the BIA had a hard time grabbing some of those. So just send me an email if you would like a copy of those slides, and my email is listed in the chat as well. So just grab it there and send me a note, and I'll get you those copies. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you all. Bye-bye.